Thank you all for joining us for this lively conversation, CIO IT Priorities. Good to see some great CIOs who joined us here, who can no doubt offer their own thoughts as well. What a consequential time it is to be a technology executive. If anything, since the sort of almost exactly 4 years since the pandemic reared its ugly head, the role of technologists has been amplified remarkably as leaders who have fostered resilience, who have found new revenue streams for organizations, new means of collaboration, better means of monitoring and ensuring the health of the operation, and so forth. And obviously further accelerated now with advances in artificial intelligence across especially the past 18 months or so. And looking forward to diving into all those details with this distinguished panel. We have across this group Patrick Day, who's to my right from Rockwell Automation, Faisal Mushtaq to his right, Cisco Sanchez, and Arpit Dave. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Looking forward to hearing from each of you. Cisco, I thought we'd start with you. You're 2.5 years or so into your role at Qualcomm as the Global Chief Information Officer. That follows 25 years as a tech leader and executive at FedEx. And yours has been a remarkable journey as a company and fostered as a leader from an organization with a heritage and a remarkable legacy in hardware, now developing much more towards focus on services. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that transformation and the role that your team is playing in it.
Yeah, sure. So for those that don't know Qualcomm, we are a hardware company. So everything that you have in your lap, probably something that is, we have something in there. So everything you love, we built. But we don't want to be the hardware company. We want to be a hardware and a software company and a subscription company. But to do that pivot is super hard, where software has to be just as important as hardware. And so we started the journey identifying what does the business want to accomplish. Let's think of that 3-year roadmap, identifying those big capabilities. And then we said, how do we pivot towards that? And we said, well, developers are important on how you build out your platform. And so when you think of a developer, they write software. They don't really write hardware. And so those developers are super important. So we said, we're going to pivot super hard in that direction, allow for change to happen, and start to build key components so developers are front and center and it's part of the ecosystem. But it's a whole mental model shift where people are trying to drive for efficiencies and gains in the hardware. And we're saying, no, but software is going to pay more bills later on because it's recurring over and over again. And so we're started. We launched something called the AI Hub. You can Google it, AI Hub, and where it shows all the cool stuff that is available on edge for AI capabilities. We've launched a development center to start that journey, and now marketplaces. But it takes courage and boldness and partnership to start the journey because predominantly, our heritage is hardware, but a lot of work. But I think it's all worth it in the long term.
And who better than the IT organization to lead this, given the fact that you've been a service provider of sorts to the organization, and you know what good looks like with other organizations that you engage with?
Well, typically, IT professionals here, I would assume, we know how to build resilient, scalable solutions. It's just what we do. We don't like phone calls at 2 in the morning. I don't like phone calls at 2 in the morning. And so we know how to scale stuff. We also know how to build it properly, knowing how to pull data out of it. And so who's better to lead it than saying, let's go after software solutions because they will break. Let's start building the capabilities to allow for others to use because the IT organization knows how to do it. Yeah. We know cloud. We know infrastructure. And so who's better to do it? And so that's why we raised our hand and said, let's go do something courageous because we have that skill set to do it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of scaling solutions, there's few that are more consequential than artificial intelligence, and you can't gather a group of 4 technology leaders like this and not have that be one of the topics we raised, certainly. And Patrick, I thought we'd toss it to you relative to that topic. You're the Vice President of Data and Innovation and Office of Enterprise Transformation at Rockwell Automation. That follows a tenure as the Chief Data and Digital Officer at McKesson. And I'd like to ask you, I think one of the fascinating stops in your journey as a leader. You were also a technology executive at Amgen, but you also spent between 3 and 4 years in the strategy office.
I did.
And one of the really, I think, fascinating aspects of artificial intelligence is it is so accessible to the non-technologists within organizations that they're playing around with it, developing conclusions, determining potential uses and hypotheses around it, and so on. And the technology leaders need to react to all of that. And oftentimes the request comes in, go do generative AI, go do artificial intelligence. And not having a kind of strategy, the why and what the destination is, can actually be problematic as one sort of starts to shoot buckshot across the landscape relative to an idea associated with this. And I'd love to understand how you think about this as a former strategy leader, now influencing an organization like Rockwell Automation within the realm of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So, and I also work with Arpit there at Amgen, so a small world. So I think one of the things I learned during my 3.5, 4 years in strategy at Amgen, which is one of the best training grounds you can get, is I remember making a presentation about all things artificial intelligence. And I think our hit rate was like 26% or 27%. And the question was, why so low? And I likened it to discovery of molecules. So essentially what you do is you cast a wide net on molecules, and then you get a hit rate of maybe 2. And one of them may hit it out of the park like a vaccine with Moderna. And then you sit back and hope that the next vaccine like Moderna comes around. Yeah. And I think that's what we struggle with in this space of artificial intelligence. 1, it's hard. 2, finding scalable and revenue generating programs are really difficult. So even at Rockwell, we're trying to do the same thing that Cisco just mentioned. We're actually measured as a software company, but Rockwell's bread and butter is hardware. So when you start thinking about how do you apply artificial intelligence to IoT and sensors and things like that, it requires bold steps, being creative, but I would say that every day we look at a program like this, it's a challenge. Our CEO at Amgen used to say this: is it going to bring top line revenue or bottom line profit? And I think we have to educate our teams to think more business than more technology in this space.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Arpit, still an executive at Amgen, would love to bring you into the conversation as well, the de facto Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer of the organization, broad responsibilities within that discipline. And I know from our past conversations that on the staying with the topic of strategy for a while longer, you think about what you refer to as a 12, 12, and 12. 12 weeks, 12 months, 12 years, sort of near, medium, and long term, if you will, I suppose. And as you think about the opportunities associated with artificial intelligence, and you think about the near, medium, and long term, what are some things that come to mind for you within a context like yours that have you most excited?
Thanks, Peter. Delighted to be here. For folks who don't know Amgen, we're a biotech company, and our mission is to serve patients. Very simple thing to do, a very simple thing to say, hard thing to do. The way we're thinking about artificial intelligence is unification of biology and technology is really enabled through where we are with the AI in the journey. We're finding ourselves in a very fortunate position over the last decade of investment that we have made in the AI and data foundation. It really is giving us the acceleration. To your question generally about strategy, right? So what we think about strategy is really, what is strategy, right? It's an integrated set of choices that we need to make to achieve an outcome. And as we think about AI, the type of outcomes we're thinking about are speed to patient. It's really critical for us. We have life-saving, life-altering medicine, but it's a shame if it takes a long time to reach the patients that we need to reach. Second one, we heard a lot about demographics. Demographics needs more innovation like one we're making. So how can we accelerate it? Productivity is the other one. Every organization is looking for productivity. So the approach we're taking, Peter, to your question, we're really thinking both near term. We have to do that because there's a lot of innovation that is happening outside of the walls of Amgen. We want to be in the best position that we can take advantage of innovation that many of you are taking advantage of or making yourself. So one, how do we position ourselves to take advantage of external innovation? We ourselves are driving a lot of internal innovation as well. So how are we making sure that we're building foundation, which may not be giving us value right now, but we're building on top of those to drive innovation? So our approach is both, deliver value in short term, but also don't be short-sighted and make investment in the foundation that we need.
Yeah, great way to typify that. Faisal, I'd love to bring you into the conversation, if I may. Till recent days, and for the most of the past 4.5 years, the Chief Technology Officer at Sleep Number. And you've talked about, in a recent catch-up you and I had, about how people underestimate the work to be done to scale the value of artificial intelligence. That the accessibility of let's say ChatGPT, for example, provides a false narrative as to ease of use and broader adoption, and thus the value that can be derived from it. Talk a bit about your perspective there, why that's the case, and what some of the building blocks to get real value from your perspective.
Yeah. So first of all, glad to be here. Artificial intelligence is an overnight success in 70 plus years in the making. So the concept, the technology evolved over time. We are just lucky at this time, the compute, the power, the models have evolved to a point that and the product market fit has started to evolve, especially with ChatGPT. So if you break it down, the way I see it is there are 3 different elements. The first one is the model, the AI itself, which is the most visible part. People talk about LLMs now, there's supervised learning, supervised learning. And those models are evolving, and my hypothesis is that models will become commodity. As long as you have the right requirement, you can get the right model that you need. The second thing that comes into the picture is the data. Either you're doing it on the public data, or you have private proprietary data that you want to train it. And going forward, data would be the key differentiator that you're using to build AI. But the third aspect, which is the most boring or underappreciated, is the plumbing and the pipelines you need to do to run those AIs at scale. And those are the ones that take longer than expected. They have to be designed in an appropriate fashion, cost efficiencies, latencies, all those things have to be considered. So those are the areas that typically is where organizations will, if they're building their own framework, they'll have to invest upfront to build the right technologies. So typically what I've seen is that it takes longer. Like the features that I was supposed to launch, AI-based features in 1 year to 2.5 years, and one of the reasons was these long tail of development that entails. So I think I will say that when you're planning your AI strategy, you have to very clear about what's your value proposition, what's your business case you're trying to solve. Are you building your own? Are you using services that layer on top of it? What tools are you using? What infrastructure? And I think treat infrastructure with respect, I think. That will be the key point.
Very interesting. Thank you for that. Some interesting perspectives in terms of the building blocks to get to your ultimate destination. Cisco, you've talked about 3 different areas in which you're defining value from artificial intelligence: at the edge, the near edge, and the cloud. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you're seeing in each of those spaces and the extent to which you have any examples that you could provide. Then so much the better.
Sure. So I love your analogy, by the way. It's like 14 years in the making. Yeah. AI, hype or no hype, there's a ton of value, but I think we're just starting to know how to use it properly. And so when I talk about the 3 areas of focus for AI, everybody knows ChatGPT. Who's played with ChatGPT in the room? Me too. We know that model of I ask it a question, it goes to a cloud, or goes somewhere. It's the cloud. Goes to a cloud, it gets the answer, and comes back down. And it uses a lot of hardware for inference. We use inference usage. We're not training the model, at least not all of us. Some of us are. And so the inference utilization case is super easier. It's easier. Ask a question, you go to the cloud. I don't think it has to be that way. I think there's 2 other models that you can also use. The first one is we all have a cool little phone that has a ton of processing power available that we don't leverage enough. And so AI on edge is super interesting to me to allow for those AI use cases, and I'll tell you a reason why in a second. Then I think AI in colo or in a on-prem is typically for your local data. And then it's AI in cloud. But it's all three. It's not just the cloud. And the reason I think it's not just the cloud is if we were to just to do that, then you have a lot more cloud data centers all over the place and consumption, and I don't think that's sustainable. And you don't need that much power for a lot of our use cases. I think some of it on-prem or in a colo is because you need to house your own data because of security, or because you want to localize it, or because you don't want data to leave your tenant. And then I think the first one on edge is really interesting, where if we can take advantage of the compute on the phone or in your laptop, then there's some use cases that can also light up. So let me give you an example. Let's say we have our, does anybody plug their phone in at night? We all do. And then we wake up in the morning, and the first thing we probably do is check email. And then we start deleting all the junk email and unsubscribe, and then look at our calendar, and then identify, what do I got to go do today? What should I wear? Stuff like that. What should I eat? While your phone's plugged in, imagine if you can have the AI engine running in the night. It looks at your inbox, it sees all the junk email, unsubscribes, tells you what it did. And then it goes through and says, here's your calendar, you have to go buy your wife a present. Here's 5 selections already selected for you. That's Copilot on edge. That's super interesting. And I don't think we've leveraged that power yet, because it's personalized, it's on your device, it's about you, not about someone else. And so I think the untapped nature of AI is still untapped. Tons of benefit across the spectrum. We just need to figure out how to start using some more of those use cases to allow for us to take advantage of a better, easier world. At least that's what I believe.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And indeed, if you spend time with the venture community, including some that are here, there are a lot that are spending sort of like investing in digital chief of staff or other AI use cases that facilitate some of what you've described as well. It'll be interesting to see the innovation that comes as a result of that.
Yeah.
Fascinating vision you have. Arpit, I wanted to ask you, we just heard Cisco's sort of 3 areas of focus from an artificial intelligence perspective. You have 3 different areas in which you're also focused as well, and I wonder if you can kind of share some of the perspectives as to the differentiating factors across those.
Happy to. And I love your phone. It's really neat.
Yeah,
it's a foldable phone.
Yeah, it's a foldable.
I've been keeping an eye on it. Okay.
Cisco, you better keep an eye on it.
Related to artificial intelligence in our industry, we have a firm belief that we're at the hinge moment when it comes to unification of biology and technology. And that hinge moment is here. So when we think about our business, we see across the business of Amgen, AI will transform the company. But we generally think about 3 domains. One, we're thinking about enablement. So that applies to everyone who is sharing our mission to serve patients in Amgen. How are we making their life easier? So that's where you think about ChatGPT of the world, GitHub Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. I guess everyone has Copilot, right? But all of those, end of day, are really designed to make a worker more productive. So one area that we're really focused on is enablement. How are we enabling scientists, manufacturing worker, or field staff, better version of themselves by giving them the enablement tool? So that's area 1. The second one is really thinking about the future of the firm. The best analogy is electricity invention. Electricity had a lot of benefit to humanity, but when you think about industrial era, it allowed us to move machine, not just where the lamp was, but lamp could be moved everywhere where we wanted machine to be. And if you think about our processes today, how most organizations are designed is they're designed around where the data is. And what AI will actually do, and it's doing it today, is allowing us to move data where the work needs to happen. So we can think about the future of the firm very differently. The way we're doing it is looking at our end-to-end processes. It's the right way to think about it. So if you think about any enterprise, what are the top 10 processes you have that runs your company? And how are you moving actually AI and data where it needs to be? So that's the second category, which is we're just thinking about the firm differently. And the third one that all of my colleagues talked about, which is giving our business competitive advantage. So for us, it means better molecule, faster reach to patient. Just one number, 85% of clinical trials, even today, gets delayed because of recruitment issue, meaning you cannot find right patient to participate in clinical trial. Just imagine power of that. If you can remove those issues and cut down the cycle time that we have to bring drugs to patients from 14 years, 12 years, down to maybe 10, maybe 8. Maybe we can cut it in half. So that's about competitive advantage for us. It's speed and per molecule. So those are the 3 areas, Peter, that we're thinking about, how AI will add value across the enterprise for now as well as in future.
And the extent to which it reaches, allows your organization to reach its destination and accomplish its goals more quickly, the impact on humanity will be profound, to say the least.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Patrick, well, we heard from Cisco and ARPIT in terms of areas of focus from an artificial intelligence perspective. More generally speaking, you have a really made an interesting point as we caught up recently that no longer is technology the limiting factor, the governor on progress. It's actually people. And sort of for the first time, it's pivoted such that that's the case. Talk a bit about how, especially in light of that insight, how you've thought about working with your team to ensure that, in fact, the people are not the impediment here, and what some of the means you're using in order to ensure that's the case.
Yeah, I think as you sit here and you listen to all these esteemed colleagues and all of you, I think it's clear that we've reached, as ARPIT used the term, hinge point in the world of technology. So 5 years ago, we used to struggle and say, well, if we had this tech, we could do this. I think today, we're flipping that and saying, if we have this type of person, we could do this. It isn't the technology. So it's finding the talent to fit into some of the technologies that are out there. So almost all of us are struggling to find people who are really qualified in certain disciplines. And I think for us, it's when we find the disciplines, how do we unlock them to basically achieve what we used to call their full potential? How do we give them the opportunity to achieve full potential? And remove the barriers that exist today. So almost all of us will struggle with budgets, will struggle with competitive issues, our CEOs asking us, why you're not going fast enough? And almost all of us have to deal with the same issue every day. But the reality is, again, it's us who's inhibiting our own progress. So I think for me, it's getting a team that we can just empower, give them the opportunity to go do some cool stuff, get out of the way. But it does lean to some of the other things we heard. At the end of the day, if we are not able to show a value, then some of the best projects are the ones you actually shut down. They're not the ones you take forward. And most of us get excited because we spend so much time on POCs, so we'll run 30 of them. And we'll keep running 30 of them so we can burn 30 of them and the capital that goes with it. So we've got to find a way to stop that. Yeah. And we live in really amazing times. And as Arpit was talking, today there's 8,000 medicines in clinical development. 75% of those will be first in class. No treatment. So imagine applying some of these techniques to that so you can reach people, make a difference in humanity. And the reason I say that is because Amgen uses Rockwell equipment to make some of this stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's how the connection comes.
That's really great. Great to hear. Thank you for those perspectives as well. So Faisal, I wanted to pull on a thread that you alluded to in your first response, and kind of the elephant in the room whenever talking about topics like the ones we've spoken about so far is cybersecurity and the consequential issues associated with it. Even before the introduction of generative AI, of course, this was a profound worry and a consequential issue, even an existential one for many. This is amplified, if anything, with better technology, which is also in the hands of clever bad actors as well. Talk a bit about some of the practices or methods that you've seen work well to get a company on an appropriate footing to be able to proceed with greater confidence, while understandably and necessarily taking at least some risks as part of the innovation process relative to the topics we've spoken about so far.
A great question. So I think before I answer, I think I just wanted to double down on what Cisco mentioned on edge computing. and AI. Then I'll answer your question. So I think the edge AI is very underestimated, but the power of edge AI. So he was given an example of smartphones. In our case, it was the smart bed, which had a lot of compute power already sitting there. So just by doing local AI, you can cut the cost. Because when you do something in the cloud, one thing you forget is who's paying for it. Right? So that part, I think, when you amplify across millions and millions of users, doing at the edge where the hardware already exists, really amplifies the cost beneficence. So now to your cybersecurity question. So again, the first exposure that we had was in a board meeting when there was when this whole generative AI became more mainstream, and there was an incident where a Samsung engineer loaded something, and it became so. One point is when you do something in the cloud, you're making it public, whatever data that you're doing. So just like when internet came, there used to be a boundary around your network that there's a firewall, and that whole paradigm changed with AWS and Azure, and the whole security had to be rethink that how you implement it. Same thing here. So first you have to define your policies, like what you're going to do. Are you using public framework? Are you going to use enterprise where your data is your key differentiator or value proposition, and you don't want it to be shared? So I think that's how you define those policies. Who has access to it? What are the guidelines? Who can use what? So I think that part, I think the sooner you get ahead of it, because one of the challenge is that everything is so easy. You press a button, click of a button, and a lot of things can spin off, a lot of things can do in the cloud that you later on realize what has happened. So defining those policies, the tooling around it. So you also have guideline that you want to innovate faster, you want to be competitive against your competitors, but you also have to define these guidelines. So typically the way you do it is that you define best policies, you use the right set of tools, and then you first define what's negotiable and what's not negotiable. So typically a lot of companies, if their data is the key essence, then you need to make sure that most of the training that you're doing is done in a non-public environment, for example. But if your data is general, but it's more about what you do with it, and your business case is your differentiator, then it's a different use case. So I think you have to understand your business and how you're using AI, and what capabilities you have in your team also, what kind of talent you have. Sometimes you will rely on third party or other partners to build that, augment that capacity or talent gaps that you have. So it's more about holistically thinking through it and making right decisions, whether it's policy framework or whether it's your guidelines that you set up, or the tools, the architecture, the data framework. And one of the things that's happening is with this whole generative AI, there are a lot of startups doing really great things. So a lot of companies, a lot of startups have point solutions of what they are doing. So when you're doing it, every solution has to go through that security validation that are you copying your data there, or you're running differently. So I'll say that it's more about getting ahead of it and understanding how you are using AI, what talent you have, and what tools, and defining that policy upfront, I think.
Yeah, ensuring you have the right governance practices, the right guardrails in place, that you're explicit about those things. All great policies and great insights, certainly. Cisco, in the last two answers, both in terms of people being now the limiting factor and some of Patrick's ideas on how best to overcome that, in addition to some of the people attributes of cybersecurity that Faisal just mentioned. I know you've also been thinking, as everyone on stage I'm sure, about the skills that are necessary for the future in light of the innovation that is coming and to come. And I wonder if you could talk a bit about how you've thought about reskilling or adding additional capabilities of your team in light of the areas that you're pursuing and that you've described already in this conversation.
Yeah. Well, particularly when you think about AI, it's not really a new discipline. We were doing AI as part of ML. Remember when we would do that too? And so a lot of those skill sets for AI, yes, a little bit different. RAG is a little bit different, retrieval augmented generation, a little bit different. But the essence of how you actually are taking a model, pulling data, building your vector database, doing that prompting is still a lot of your ML teammates. So a lot of the decision scientist group that was there is a natural gravitation pool. But at least that's what we're seeing. A lot of the hardcore skill sets of common development still valid in your vector databases, particularly if you're building your own RAG model. And so what we're seeing is not so much you have to reinvent a whole nother group. It's taking from the best parts of who we are anyway. And the reason I bring this up is IT's typically, we've learned to adapt over time. And so think about when IT first started, it was COBOL. Does anybody remember COBOL? I do too. And then it went from like COBOL, Fortran, C, C++, Java, Python, and then pick your next one. And so the IT professionals have to have always been able to be adaptable to change. And so, yes, is it different? Of course it is, but it's a natural thing that we know how to do. It's the same thing of mainframe to distributed to cloud. We didn't say we need all new people. We said, how do you retrain people so they understand that area? Yes, some people will be left behind for COBOL because that's what they want to do. But I think the natural progression for AI tool sets is in our wheelhouse because we are very adaptable people, like sincerely. We know how to adjust and adapt. And I think that's the greatest strength that an IT department has is the adaptability that we have done over the many, many years. And so I think in the AI, it's new, it's fun, it's sexy, it's awesome. But there are a lot of skill sets that we already have that can gravitate towards that. Will you have to reinvent some? Yes. Prompting's different. Like how do you do prompt engineers? Different. But it's almost like a business requirement or a scrum master. And so it's a story. And so there's a lot of these skill sets I think are inherent of who we are. So I don't think it's a reinvention. I think it's more of an adaptation.
Yeah, I like the analogy, and I think it's important, especially as you call out, and it harkens back to your initial answer as to why IT ought to be the leader in a transformation like the one you described from hardware to services, that IT has been through these kinds of transformations, skill-based transformations, state-of-the-art becoming de rigueur, becoming something that's fading away and on to the next thing. And so who better than this organization in order to help the rest of the organization reach the destination you're defining? Arpit, I wanted to continue with you, still on the people topic. In an organization like Amgen, you've got a number of constituents you need to think about as you think about the application of a topic like artificial intelligence and innovation more generally speaking. Can you talk a bit about how different personas that you are contemplating and different ways of interacting with them and different changes that you see afoot relative to them as well?
Yeah, it's a really good question, keeping the same theme, right? And I agree with a lot of things, Cisco, you said. One nuance that at least we observe is the whole business model changing. So if you think about our business and biotech, the old model was really around you find something and you test it, right? The direction in which the industry is headed is actually you model something, you simulate it in lab using computers, and then you actually design those molecules physically. So really think about the future, which is it's not really about this iterative cycle of you test, because you've been finding some stuff and test hypothesis versus the future. You're actually simulating and designing the molecule that you have figured out a target in the body for. So in that new future, you can start imagining the roles differently. We actually firmly believe that AI is actually with human in the loop. But the question is, what role is AI playing and what role we want humans to play? This is where if we think about personas or staff that we have at Amgen, we have amazing scientists, we have best-in-class scientists, but wouldn't it be shame, right, for them to be copying data from their amazing experiment into different tools every day and spending a lot of time? So one is just think about the future of the workflow where scientists is actually doing the science aspect, and you have either automation or AI actually enabling fully. So one is the scientific workflow that we think a lot about. The other one is manufacturing. Patrick referred to work we do collectively. We just did a ribbon cutting 2 weeks ago in Ohio, our first most advanced assembly plant, and where we see that humans with the automation, robotics, and AI are able to produce double the output. Mm-hmm. And double the output for us, it just means ability to reach more patients with the medicines that we make. So second one is really about manufacturing workflow. How are we taking the labs, flow the data into manufacturing, and then enabling manufacturing with the higher level of automation? And the third one is all the office worker. This is where enablement goes a long way. There are a lot of administrative tasks that teams are still doing today that with automation and AI, we're taking completely out of hand of people. The key is, how are you building trust with the automation that you're putting in? So that's where I see the responsibility of a lot of leaders in the team as well, that the success or failure of this kind of venture is actually how much trust you can build into the solution you're designing, so then everyone is getting more and more comfortable using them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And Faisal, Arpit alludes to a topic that is coming up for very good reason, the idea of AI with human in the loop, the extent to which in the balance between that collaboration, when is the point where the technology overtakes the humans such that we start to like reduce staff and so on? There are others who will say that for the foreseeable future, it's really a question of amplifying the productivity of existing staff and rethinking the talent strategy as a result of having kind of an army of interns, if you will, that is the technology, or an army of junior staff that is the technology with more experienced people overseeing them, experienced humans overseeing them. Talk a bit about your own philosophy and thought process as you think about that evolution.
Yeah, I think so. Great question. So the first point is, when does the machine overtake the humans? So the North Star is typically called AGI, or Artificial General Intelligence, and there are different hypotheses. So I saw a very nice report last week that they projected based on how LLMs and the AI advancements, and with NVIDIA stock going to such high valuation, when it will come. So to 2030, some people say next 8 years, 5 years. So that's the North Star, where hypothetically the machines will become smarter than the humans. What will happen? So the first point, I think you already referenced, that it's higher productivity. So instead of X number of people, you might need 1/5 the amount of people to do the same job, depending on the job. So that part is happening, and it will start evolving, and I'll touch upon that. The second part is, there might be some cases where humans might not be needed at all, and it can completely be AI-driven also. So there's a replacement, or there is a productivity or enhancement that you get from AI. There's a very nice paper, August of last year, from University of Pennsylvania, and where they showed what jobs will be impacted. Again, it's a forecast based on data, but I'll start by saying what will not be impacted. So the painters, the roofers, so those jobs are hopefully will not be impacted. But there are different aspects where there is a lot of text, proofreading, legal, where instead of 20 people doing that, you might be doing with 2 people who use AI to generate the content, and 1 person or 2 people can do the proofreading or can do the overall human kind of inspection and review. So software, I mean, there are a lot of examples that really great Python code being generated. I will say again, it will be case-by-case basis. It will be a while where AI-generated code can be used in a product, a commercially available product. But it might be that there are repetitive things that instead of doing manually, you can generate, and those libraries, those kind of a framework that you can build, and then you can write custom code in there. So again, it's a productivity increase. Instead of taking X number of hours, you can do faster. So that thing is happening right now and will continue to evolve. That's why what you have to do is every decision you have to do with intelligence, that it's not like all the jobs will go away. And I have a very interesting example of when I will give a talk. So there's a Macy's Day Parade from 1906 where it's all horse carriages. And they have a picture of that. And then from 1916, it's all cars. So 10 years, the world changed. And the same arguments were there, that a lot of jobs will be impacted when horses are no longer there. But if you look at the last 100 years, the amount of wealth or amount of jobs or productivity increase that happened with automobile, different professions were created. So there will be a creative destruction right now. You have to be very intelligent, where I will use it, how I will use it, and what will be the benefits. So personally, I think we are also seeing it. I'm relying on AI wherever it makes sense to get higher productivity. Marketing campaigns, we are trying to get it through that. But obviously, it's not that we just cut and paste and send it, but you generate some of the raw ideas, and then you do the human level. So the key for humans would be when you pass on that decision making. So if you remember Terminator, it's always good to have machine as a tool that gives you information, that gives you options, that gives you data and objectivity. But decision making, that when you say who will press that button, if you pass on the machines, then I think then we will be like Terminator. So hopefully that won't happen. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's happening. You cannot fight it. You have to adopt it. You have to look at your constraint, your business model, your organization dynamics, and make the right decisions right now and going forward.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, speaking of the time of the horse and buggy, Patrick, your company was formed during the time of the horse and buggy. Yours is the oldest company represented here, and I wonder, especially if you think about the progress that's been made, the transformation and the foundation required to accomplish some of the things you've already mentioned during this conversation. You know, I'm sure there are people in the audience who are at differing rungs of the ladder in terms of their maturity associated with modernizing their practices. Can you talk a little bit about that journey? I think what's fascinating about a company like Rockwell is its ability to set a new foundation such that it can, in fact, take advantage of the innovation we're describing.
Yeah, I mean, so I haven't been in Rockwell that long, not 120 years. So, but it's a fascinating story. So even today, the foundation of Rockwell is a product called Allen Bradley, which is a little controller. I don't know, they're about this big, maybe they go a little bigger, but that's the bread and butter of Rockwell. And what Rockwell's done is evolve around that product from a controller today to the things that you heard about, robotics and automation. And Faisal elegantly talked about how we move speed. At the end of the day, I think almost every CEO is thinking of better, faster, cheaper. So every 90 days, they're trolling themselves out there to talk about the pennies they earn on the dollar. And part of that is because they're interested in making sure that whatever efficiency gains they get, they have to find ways to pass that. And it doesn't mean the employees are going away. And I think Rockwell has done a pretty good job of evolving themselves from that controller today to, for example, we will service cybersecurity for a company. We'll take over that business and we'll run it for you. There are many other avenues of software that we've evolved around. So I think companies that are able to, as you've heard here, adapt, I think that's the term. If you adapt to what's going on in the world, are the companies that are beginning to start to level up.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to see what happens. I think there are many schools of thought about artificial intelligence. If you hear Elon, he says one thing. If you hear Andrew Ng, he says one thing. And you can get them both in a room and debate what's right. And we actually had Andrew, and he said Elon was crazy. But having said all of that, I think for us, it's the ways to apply all this back into our company. And we have a framework called Rock on Rock, which is Rockwell on Rockwell. So it's like eating your own dog food. Can we apply it to our own company first before we take it out to someone else? Yeah. And I think that's one way to evolve a company, is being able to see, does it really work for us?
Yeah. And again, who, as Cisco said earlier, who better than a team like yours to help with that sort of a transformation? I think that's very well articulated.
I don't think we view ourselves as a service organization. So going with my theme earlier, we are as equally strategic to any company today in the world of technology than we ever have been.
Yeah.
So in the past, they'd view us and say, you're a service organization. Today, you can't do anything without us.
Right, exactly.
You just can't.
Well, with that, if I can just offer a quick meta message here, this is a time where we especially need to leverage our ecosystem to understand where peers of ours, what they're doing, what they're experiencing, what's working well, which hypotheses have been proven correct or incorrect, as the case may be. So learning from conversations like this one and conversations we'll be having throughout these 2 days will be especially important at a time of great dynamism, to say the least. And with that, Patrick, Faisal, Cisco, Arpit, thank you so much for a great conversation. Won't you join me in thanking them?
Thank you for having me.